Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back. It's been a long time. It's been a hot minute since we watched the Trope Talk. This time, their newest one, and probably one of my favorite tropes in literature, media, whatever, doomed heroes. I would say, before we dive in though, before we go into my tangent that will probably end up running for 5 minutes long, um, please go check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. All right, doomed heroes. I would say Anakin Skywalker is certainly a doomed hero. He's essentially, especially with the release order of the Star Wars movies, you know Anakin is going to become Darth Vader. You just don't entirely know how the fall happened. So essentially, he is a doomed hero. You could also say Obi-Wan is somewhat of a doomed hero. He's fated to train Darth Vader. He is fated to then die by Darth Vader's hands. Although, is that fate necessarily doom in a way for the Jedi because of the Jedi's belief, the Force, and how Obi-Wan truly isn't dead, technically, kinda. He's more powerful than you could ever possibly imagine. Or I would also consider Frodo Baggins a doomed hero. Because especially because I can't remember the passage in the books if it's noted that Gandalf makes like a certain reaction to the Frodo saying he'll take the ring to Mordor. But in the movies, we get that look from Gandalf of when Frodo volunteers. We see that look on Gandalf's face. He's like, I know exactly what's going to happen to you. You're not going to be normal after this. So in that sense, at least in the regards of the movies, because I can't remember. I would also argue it's in the books as well. It's just maybe not as obvious that Frodo's fate is kind of doomed to him never being able to fit back within Hobbiton or really in Middle Earth at all anymore. He has to go to Valinor because he just cannot fit in with Middle Earth after being a ring bearer and going through the trauma that he went. In the movies, I think it's definitely more clear that, especially based on Gandalf's reaction, that Frodo's going down a path he won't really be able to come back from. So, yeah. Those are the two I can think of off the top of my head. I cannot really think of any other heroes right now. I guess in a way you could probably also argue Iron Man, I guess, if you want to take into account Infinity War and Endgame. If we just look at those two movies. Also, I guess with the foreshadowing present with Tony Stark's dream, I think in the first Avengers movie, I think that's when he had that dream. With all of his friends dead around him, you could say he's always been a doomed hero from the start there, at least from the moment the Avengers storyline began. That he was pretty much fated to die. He was doomed to death. So, yeah, I guess we got 3 right off the bat there. I'm curious exactly how she's going to cover this series. That was only a 3-minute tangent. There's probably going to be way more.
Lots of stories draw their audience in by asking one fundamental question. How is this going to end? What dreams and goals will our characters accomplish? What exciting schemes will come to fruition? Who will end up kissing whom? An ever-present struggle in storytelling is how to keep an audience engaged with the story, and one of the most efficient ways to do that is to give them a big old question mark at the end of everything they're invested in. They might care about a character, but surely they'll care about them even more if they don't know if the character will even survive the story. They might wonder about the solution to
We found the killer's boss, but not the killer's boss's boss. By Joe.
A mystery, but they'll keep watching forever if you just dangle that answer a few episodes ahead of them the whole time, promising it'll be really good. They might care about a romantic
With your husband dead, we can finally be together. Not if I get amnesia.
subplot, but you can use that to keep them hooked if the couple keeps getting distracted by breakups and miscommunications and they never actually reach a stable dynamic. This school of thought is round.
You can't leave yet. Don't you want to get to the good stuff? And one more season.
Frustrating. It frequently
Yeah.
exposes a level of insecurity in the story itself, feeling the need to lure an audience along with a promise that eventually things will get good and make sense rather than letting the story just be good.
Yes, precisely. Although, like all things, there's of course, it's how to, because that's this is one of the things that I think, it really depends, because how to put it, how to really say, I'm trying to think of a story. I'll go with Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn trilogy, the first era Mistborn, because I haven't read the other era. Coming to understand the magic system, and also he's putting in little notes there that are making you question, like, oh, how is this going to play out, right? But he doesn't, like, I think what Red might be alluding to here is the kind of cop-out way of trying to keep people invested in just continuing to create artificial problems, like, miscommunication being one of the most frustrating tropes, I think, in fantasy. Rarely does the miscommunication trope ever work for me. Because you have to really explain it. You have to really show the audience, like, why this one character cannot confide in this other character. Hence why I think miscommunication in Star Wars works. Anakin, like, we understand that if Anakin talked to the Jedi Order, if he had just come clean with the struggles that he was internally having, then things probably would not have turned out the way that they turned out. However, because Anakin understands and fears, because of the fear he has for the fate of his wife, he feels like the only way that he can save his wife's life, the one way he can save his wife's life is by getting into the Jedi archives. And in the Jedi archives, you have to be a master in order to get that, which is why he was so mad that despite being the youngest ever Jedi High Council member, they were not giving him the rank of master because he was not yet ready to be a master. But he knows that if he doesn't, feels like because of his dreams, because of his visions, if he doesn't get that rank of master, he's not going to get access to the information he needs to save his wife. Although if he had gone to the Jedi, they probably would have been there for him. However, just because of the kind of, I would say, outward face that the Jedi have been giving, the kind of trying to be stoic, and just the way they kind of put all this pressure on him of him being like the chosen one, that makes him not want to talk. So the miscommunication in Anakin's arc makes sense. I'm trying to think of a bad miscommunication arc right now. I don't really bad miscommunication arcs. Last Jedi's miscommunication arc, even though it was kind of purposeful miscommunication, I did not like I do think The Last Jedi is the best of the sequel trilogy. However, the arc with Poe and Admiral Holdo, I hated that arc so much. So much. It was so bad. It didn't make any sense once you start to really look into it. Like, even you put one magnifying glass on it and you're just poking holes through it, where like so many things could be avoided if they just talked. And to me, it didn't make sense as to why Holdo was withholding information in the circumstances that they found themselves in. What tangent was I going on? Oh, yeah. But yeah, leaving questions for the reader. I think if it really depends. Like, you cannot, if it's blatant, like, obvious, like, hey, you're just doing this to drag me along. Like, putting characters in danger is, I would say, a no-no. Like, just like, oh, he's in danger again. What's gonna happen? That's not what keeps me reading. What keeps me reading is finding answers to the questions that I have, but more so through those questions formulating from me noticing little hints from the author, like Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn. After getting through the last book, the Hero of Ages, I think is what the third book is called, because it's Mistborn, Well of Ascension, Age of Heroes, I think. Hero of Ages. He did a really good job at kind of leaving you with questions but not giving you the full answer. And then he does kind of blatantly say it at points, but the way in which he blatantly states the answers to these questions, I feel like is so well written, that it still feels good to get those answers right. Because obviously you don't want to, especially in your final book, you don't want to leave the reader with too many questions. You may want to leave them with a couple of questions to make them continue thinking of your book series, that you can maybe return to that world, but you don't want to leave them maybe with too many questions on, like, it's so hard to, because again, this stuff is so subjective, right? There are probably people out there that enjoy the miscommunication trope. There are probably people out there that enjoy their stories to be more like where the hero just keeps getting in danger because maybe they're sadistic and they like having their hero constantly in danger at the end of every chapter or something like that. You know, who knows? It's all really subjective.
The whole time. There's a lot to be said for a story with an intriguing and unknown ending, but if a story pins all its quality on the distant finale fulfilling everything it's ever promised along the way, you run the risk of a story ending so badly that it retroactively ruins everything it ever did to build it up.
Yes, I agree with that statement there. My dogs are barking, so I hope you can probably hear them in the background, but I'm going to keep fucking talking. What was I saying? What was my point? Forgot it. I had it and then I forgot it. But yes, I agree. So yeah, now that I let her finish talking instead of just pausing and then going on my tangent. Yeah, I agree. As long as the story doesn't pin everything on, like, hey, the ending will make everything clear. As long as that's not happening, I think you're fine. But yeah, if nothing is being made clear, like you gotta, that's the real way, I think, to bring people along in the story, because that's what happens. That's what Brandon Sanderson does. He gives you some answers to certain things as you're going along, but what they tend to do is they might create maybe another question, or they'll answer one thing and then it'll get you thinking about this other unsolved question that you have that could be connected, right? I'm not going to say, I don't want to say any spoilers for, I don't like saying spoilers for books. I have no problem saying spoilers for like movies and television shows, but for books I kind of don't want to get into really spoilers for. But there are things that I think happen within his Mistborn trilogy there that are like, yeah, this answers this question here, but this also has me now thinking, is this answer connected to this question that I have, and if so, what's going to come from that, right? That is the single most, that I believe to be the most satisfying way of luring the reader on, getting the reader to continue, or getting the viewer to keep watching. Whew. Okay, we're 1 minute into this episode.
Some stories will instead rely on incremental progress. Characters will have little victories along the way rather than backloading everything into a distant happily ever after.
Yes.
Romantic subplots will progress and resolve. Arc villains will be defeated in season finales instead of series finales. Episodic plots will have episodic happy endings that don't get undone. Questions will be answered without greater mystery caveats. In these stories, even if the full-blown ending is a little lackluster, there will still be value in a rewatch because the story did more than just set up the finale. It didn't pin all its hopes on one big question question, and it gave the audience and the characters tangible rewards for sticking with it. There will still be overarching questions, and most likely how will it end is still a core question the audience is expected to ponder, but it's not a carrot on a stick drawing the audience forward. If this kind of story ends with "and the adventure continues," the audience is likely to be pretty satisfied, because the adventure thus far has been rewarding, and we don't mind the implication that they'll just keep doing that fun stuff forever. And then some stories break the fundamental structure of this rule. Some stories tell you straight from the start how they're going to end, and more than that, some stories tell you that they're going to end badly. The hero is going to die, the kingdom is going to fall, the love story is doomed to end in tragedy, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their lives. Now, how in the world can that possibly work?
I'm actually working on this trope, and so I finished my third book, but after going through a second draft of it, I realized this thing ain't working. So I've put it to the side, and I'm not gonna try and get that one published. I don't think, unless fucking I have friends read it and they fucking love it, but I don't think it's gonna happen. I'm not all that enthusiastic for that story that I wrote. It'll take some serious reworking, and I don't want to deal with that. So I'm writing a fourth book, and this one is doomed heroes. And what I have set up, what I'm doing, and what I love in doomed hero plots is kind of, again, subversion of tropes, or not necessarily subversion. It's kind of like putting up all these, going back to the whole concept of these questions, is like, is this going to be the doom that our heroes face, or is this going to be the doom? Like, providing so many possible things, like this is the worst case scenario. Is that the scenario they're going to go down, or like essentially going down the doom? How I'm doing it is like, they are essentially fighting against the worst possible outcome. That's what I like in doomed hero trope. That trope is not that because I'm sadistic or masochistic because I want pain. I want to be sad. I want to see the hero fighting against their doom. Even though I know they're not going to, maybe, I don't know, let's say the hero is fated to die in the end. What I want to see from that doomed hero isn't that they accept their fate, or what I want to see them do is I want to see them fighting against it, but I want them to be like, they're fighting against the worst possible outcome. I don't want the worst possible outcome to happen, right? Like, let's say it's a group of heroes. The worst possible outcome, they all die, right? The not worst possible outcome is that 2 or 3 of them die. Maybe one of them dies. The others get to live and continue on and kind of like work toward, I don't know, their dead friends' vision of the future. Like, they try and do things good then, like, so that there's still an inkling of joy, of hope there, and that their death, that they still were a hero, that they still, in a way, despite dying, despite maybe in a way also failing, not reaching the best outcome, or maybe even a neutral kind of outcome, it was still a somewhat bad outcome, that they still succeeded. They still have to succeed in a way for the doomed hero plot to work. But then again, when you look at Anakin, like the doom, I would say the doomed heroes for the prequel trilogy are Anakin and Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan not killing Anakin and leaving him to still be Darth Vader isn't the worst possible outcome. However, right, but Obi-Wan still succeeds, he still lives, and he still gets to be there for Luke to train him in the future. Our hero still succeeds, right? If, I don't know, fucking Luke and Leia died with their mom, Obi-Wan still lives, but he knows he cannot beat Vader. So then we know as an audience, because we just saw Obi-Wan does not have it in him to kill Vader. We also then see that in spoilers for the Kenobi show. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When I put this finger down, the spoilers are gone. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Spoilers now. In the Kenobi show, he could have killed Vader, but he cannot bring himself to kill his former friend. Okay, spoilers gone. So Kenobi, Obi-Wan, what we see in Revenge of the Sith is that he cannot kill Vader. He cannot bring himself to kill his former Padawan, his former brother. Luke is essentially the only one that can stop, bring an end to Vader and Palpatine. So if Luke were to fucking die with Padme, then we know that nothing good's going to happen. There really isn't hope for the galaxy, to say, so to speak. So yeah, it's delicate. You can do the doomed hero. You can have everything like suck, but there still has to be something accomplished. There still has to be something for the reader to hold on to and hope for, that something good's going to happen. Maybe not right away. Maybe down the line. Maybe years down the line. R.F. Kuang's Poppy War trilogy does this. That is a doomed hero storyline done really well. Would recommend. I'm not going to say spoilers beyond that. Holy shit, we're at 20 minutes on my reaction and only 2 minutes into this 20-minute video. This video might go an hour long.
How can you ever hope to snag an audience if they know from the very start that your story's gonna have a bad ending? How can they root for characters they know are doomed? Why would they willingly subject themselves to something emotionally gut-wrenching? And more mystifyingly, why are these stories so damn good? So today, let's talk about doomed heroes and why we as an audience do this to ourselves. Now to start
we just got through the intro.
off, let's be a little finicky with this definition. Doom comes from the Old English dom, meaning judgment, not death or destruction. A doomed hero isn't necessarily going to die, but their fate, whatever it is sealed from the beginning and usually not super fun for them. This is what distinguishes the doomed hero trope from just being another
a story where we know the ending, a story with an unhappy ending. And yeah, there's definitely some crossover.
Flavor of tragedy. A tragedy is defined by having a sad ending, but a doomed hero story is defined by telling us the ending at the beginning. There's obviously overlap, but they're defined by different core properties. The hero comes prejudged. The appeal is not in wondering what is going to happen, but how it's going to happen, because we know from the beginning how their story is going to end. And there are a lot of ways the audience can acquire this information. One of the most common contexts we find doomed heroes in, unsurprisingly,
and he's doing the Jedi thing. Yep. Prequels. Since a prequel exists to set up a known story, the audience is expected to already know. The original canon is the doom awaiting them. Oh dear. Hello there.
Is prequels. In these stories, the original narrative is the doom facing the characters in the prequel series, since the end of the prequel has to set up the beginning of the original. Anyone we recognize from the original is doomed to become whatever
Yeah, I predicted it. I knew we'd talk about Star Wars.
they were in that story, whether that's villainous, dead, a soon-to-be-dead mentor, or maybe even something that
Also, Tales of the Jedi, the miniseries they just released, fucking amazing. Also, the Andor show. If you had when they announced the Andor show like a couple years ago, I was not at all excited for it. I was like, this is gonna be pointless. The Andor show is the best live-action Star Wars show. Honestly, yeah, fucking, it's amazing. I love this show. It's got me hooked. All the characters are so well written. It's just great. It's really good.
that isn't horribly tragic, and anyone new to the plot is doomed by canon to not be that important by the time the original timeline rolls around. Prequel-based doomed protagonists can give us a very comprehensive understanding of what fate we can expect to befall our heroes, because we've already seen all the details of what happens after. And because of the way stories are structured, typically with a problem at the beginning and a solution at the end, the world we know from the original story often starts off in a pretty bad place, which means the prequel has to end in that bad place. The question frequently becomes, what has to go catastrophically wrong to make this setting happen? How does the evil emperor rise to power? What causes the apocalyptic event that leaves the post-apocalyptic world shattered? How is this powerful family line wiped out so thoroughly?
And we're never getting a season 2. This show was good. This This show was so good. Like, I didn't like it for the first, I don't know, 3-4 episodes. It didn't hook me right off the bat, but it got me at the end. Like, I just powered through, kept watching because I was still intrigued. I still wanted to know what the ending was. And the show was really surprisingly good for being like fucking puppets.
thoroughly that only a single long-lost descendant makes it to the original story. Prequels handily illustrate a truth that applies to all doomed hero stories. Knowing that it's going to end in tragedy changes how the story is constructed from the ground up. If we watch a prequel with no context of the original and treat it like a standalone story, the pacing would feel really weird. Most stories work by building towards their finale, planting a lot of disparate parts and then letting everything come together in the end when all the established themes, fun power-ups, and character arcs weave together into a climactic encounter that eventually leads into a satisfying ending. But prequels and other doomed hero stories kind of work backwards from that norm. They typically start from a stable status quo and then progress towards the finale by falling apart. If a typical story starts with a problem and ends with a solution, a prequel starts with a solved situation and ends with a problem. If you're not expecting that kind of story structure, this feels incredibly unsatisfying. Suppose you watch the Star Wars prequels with no idea what Anakin turns into. The first movie seems to set him on a standard hero's journey. Plucky kid with a lot of potential gets adopted by space wizards, tale as old as time. But then the second makes him seem very creepy and evil, and the weird part is that literally nobody ever seems to notice. The logical conclusion an audience would draw is probably that Anakin is going to be the twist villain, and Obi-Wan is the hero, since he's the one actually doing heroic stuff and getting focused on. And you might be wondering why Anakin keeps getting spotlighted when he's not doing anything so relevant to the plot to warrant that focus, and he's not yet being so actively evil to make him an actual antagonist. Then the third movie starts off with a completely different version of Anakin, who is an actual hero who doesn't do exclusively creepy evil stuff with menacing music in the background and seems to actually feel bad when he does bad things. And the focus...
Sadly, that just comes from George Lucas's kind of bad writing. I said this last night. I watched Tales of the Jedi in one sitting with like my dad, and I said this to him. I was like, "Man, we got to make Dave Filoni immortal. This motherfucker knows how to write stories. He's a far better writer than George Lucas." I like George. I think George could come up with some amazing fucking ideas, and he can come up with some really intriguing plot points and themes. His handling of themes is really well done. We see that really in episode 3, where the theme of the prequel story comes to light. It is the fall of democracy into fascism, and really how a nation can get there. One of the many ways a nation can fall into the lap of fascism. Or it's really well written. Episode 3, I feel like, is a really well written movie. Episode 2 is awful. Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, is awful. So I feel like the problems that arise from people watching the prequel story first, episodes 1 through 3 first, isn't necessarily because of, I wouldn't say necessarily because of being unfamiliar with maybe the fact that it's a prequel or whatever. I think it's more due to the fact that George Lucas just didn't write that story good. Like, I think episode 1 is actually a fine story. Episode 2 is what really brings down the prequels for me. Like, episode 1 could have been better, and maybe it should have been shortened, and then episode 2, like, episode 1 and 2 maybe combined, and then what we see in the Clone Wars, we see, like, episode 2 then is the Clone, like, episode 1 is the recruitment of Anakin, and then we get a time jump, like, maybe 40 minutes in where Anakin's now older, or, like, we're with old adult Anakin the entire way through, and we're just getting flashbacks to him as a kid throughout the movie. And then episode 1 ends with the start of the Clone Wars, episode 2 is the middle of the Clone Wars or whatever, and then episode 3 is the end of the Clone Wars. I think that would have been better, but then of course, if we got the middle of the Clone Wars with episode 2, then we probably would not have gotten the Clone Wars TV show, or maybe we would have, but we wouldn't have gotten Ahsoka, and without Ahsoka, we lose. Ahsoka's one of the best characters in all of Star Wars. Personally, she might be my favorite. She might top out Luke. Really depends on how they continue her storyline after episode 6 and before episode 7. Oh my god, we're at 30 minutes and 5 minutes.
kind of shifts instead to the larger scale orchestra.
But yeah, George Lucas's writing, I think, is what failed the prequels. I think the prequels, on a conceptual idea, are really fucking cool. I can really forgive a lot of shitty writing as long as the concepts and themes behind it are still handled well, right? Like, I think the concepts and themes within the prequel trilogy, despite the poor writing of the weak writing in episode 1 and then the shit writing in episode 2, I can forgive those just for the overall theme being told throughout. And the fact that it ends on a really strong note with episode 3 being my favorite Star Wars.
Orchestrated fall of the Republic and the rise of the Emperor. So now we have a big bad to focus on, which is great. But remember, if we think Obi-Wan is the hero, we're going to expect him to beat the obvious villain, and the fact that he never even confronts the Emperor makes no sense. Suddenly, the spotlight is fully on Anakin, and we really don't understand why. And Anakin's shift to being 100% evil feels less like a tragic downfall and more like the sudden reveal that he was always evil.
Yeah, I think... And I think the Clone Wars is what solves this issue, really, is the Clone Wars gives this focus to Anakin to really start laying more, because it does feel like if you just watch the prequels on their own, you see this kid who's so sweet. You don't really get the vibes that he's going to go evil. And then in episode 2, it kind of feels like Whiplash, where he slaughters, justifiably, he slaughters Tuscans because they kidnapped his mom, which, honestly... As a kid, he's a kid that escaped slavery, so I do feel like, in a way, he's a bit justified that he escaped slavery. His mom also ends up getting out of slavery eventually and marrying someone. And then she's kidnapped and beaten. And so, Anakin's, and then the first time he sees his mom after leaving slavery is she dies in his arms. His reaction, I think, is a bit justifiable, but yeah, the creepiness that he portrays in episode 2 is... So I think, because also the Clone Wars, what the Clone Wars does, it also really helps, I think, strengthen Anakin and Padme's relationship. Although there are a couple episodes where it kind of Padme, why are you still with him? He's very controlling and stuff like that. So kind of question Padme a bit at times. Why is she doing this to herself? Shouldn't she see this? I think there are things in Clone Wars that could have been handled better, but overall, I think Clone Wars really strengthens the understanding. If you do not watch episodes 4, 5, and 6 first, I think you can watch episodes 1, 2, Clone Wars, 3, and I think that'll definitely make it a more satisfying, thing. I think I explained that all right. But yeah, definitely if you just watch 1, 2, and 3, no idea who Darth Vader is, no idea where Anakin goes down, it can definitely feel like Whiplash.
Since, as mentioned, he spends most of the second movie being evil and nobody but Padme notices. The third movie doesn't feel like Anakin has become evil, it feels like his evilness has finally been revealed to his closest friend, the true protagonist. So they have a fight, which is pretty cool, but the Emperor gets away scot-free, and suddenly all of Obi-Wan's focus is on Anakin's kids. It's a really weird open ending with no emotional closure because it is not designed to function as a standalone story, and treating it that way really harms its impact. But the fact is, everybody who watched those movies knew how they were going to end. The whole point of the marketing of the first movie was, how is this adorable innocent child going to become Darth Vader? Because that's definitely going to happen. With doomed hero stories, we work backwards. We start with them in a solved position.
Oh my god, she's doing Zing. I fucking loved EXU Calamity. That shit, I teared up. I have no problem admitting this. I fucking cried, man. That shit hurt. Oh. Travis as Sarah. I want to see this shit animated like they've done for The Legends of Vox Machina. This was so well done. Bria Iyengar and Sam Riegel's divorced characters. Chef's kiss. It was phenomenal. Marisha Ray's character, I can't remember her name. I liked that character more so than I liked Bo and Elith. Didn't like her as much as I love Laudna. Laudna's fucking that kind of character that you come up with and you're probably never going to be able to top. It's like that moment of brilliance for a writer. Shit, I just created an amazing character. I'm never gonna be able to top this character. That to me feels like that's Laudna is Marisha's character. Like, she can make good characters, but she'll always be able to make great characters. She makes really good characters. I love all of her characters. But goddamn, I fucking love Laudna. Huh. And then let's see, Travis. I don't think Travis really has hit that golden character yet. Liam, I think Liam hit that golden character with Caleb. Caleb was amazing. Trying to think of the others. I think Ashley might have gotten there with Fern. We'll see. Laura's might be Jester. It's quite possibly Jester. I'm just trying to think of them all now. Have I hit them all? No, I haven't. Let's see, Sam. I don't think Sam is. Sam's best one might so far is his character in EXU Calamity, I think. And then I think Travis is his Sarah as well. I love Grog. Grog is my favorite character of his, but I think in terms of like emotional impact, I mean, Grog's fucking fix him in season 1. That shit hurt. But in campaign 1. But Sarah's relationship with his children. Fucking tangent again. Oh my god.
A happy ending in any other story. And then we ask the question, how does this fall apart so much that it turns into the beginning of another story?
Also, Lou Wilson's character, I love every single one of these characters in this miniseries that they did of EXU Calamity. It was amazing. This was 10 out of 10 storytelling, live theater, I guess you could say. His character, I forget the actor's name. His character was really well done. His was also kind of like that. I would say, oh man, his name is on the tip of my tongue, but I can't think of it. His character was, I would say, definitely the poster child of doomed hero out of this group of 6. Because the story starts with him. Yeah, phenomenal series.
So prequel doomed heroes are in an interesting position because we already know what happens after their life falls apart, but not every doomed hero gets a sequel.
As I said, this is my favorite trope in writing, so oh my god. This
Sometimes
is going
instead
an hour.
we know the heroes are doomed because
Prophecies. A prophecy informs our hero of the doom awaiting them. So the audience has the same information as the hero. You're screwed. Gasp.
Because there's a prophecy in play, and the audience has just as much information as the character does. The hero is informed by a reliable source that their downfall is assured, and the audience and the character wonder how this could possibly happen, because prophecies tend to be inconveniently lacking in specific preventable detail.
Yep.
Rather than starting the story with dramatic irony and more information than the heroes have, the audience follows along with the hero as they respond to this prophecy of doom in typically increasingly frantic ways. The audience might be able to predict how the hero's actions will lead to their downfall, but typically they'll only have as much information as the protagonist at any given time, so the exact mechanics of their doom remain a mystery. This is one of the only doomed heroes.
Dramatic irony. The audience has information the characters don't and can thus anticipate consequences they can.
Story structures that doesn't involve dramatic irony, since while the audience still knows the hero is doomed, the hero also knows that, which is rare. Typically, doomed heroes don't know they're doomed for most of the story, which means narratives of this type, when they do see their doom coming, tend to focus in on their personal mindset and the psychology of how they respond to a sneak peek of their own ending, because that's the most unique property of these stories. And spoiler alert, most of them don't take it very well. Someone grappling with a prophesied doom will typically respond in some way that inadvertently ensures it happens, a classic self-fulfilling prophecy. But part of what makes these stories specifically compelling is that most of us can relate to the feeling of waiting for something terrible that we know is going to happen. Much like the Hitchcockian theory of suspense, waiting for the bad thing is often a much worse feeling than just having the bad thing happen. Like, anticipating getting a shot always feels way worse than the actual jab. And on a larger, worse scale, there are many real-world diagnoses, for instance, that are prophecies of doom in their own way, and it's kind of really unpleasant to think about that stuff. And this is where we start getting into one of the more inobvious appeals of doomed hero stories. Willingly experiencing tragic, painful emotions in a controlled environment can be strangely cathartic, even if every feeling the audience experiences in the...
Okay, so I was waiting for her to maybe talk more about the prophecy thing. So I do want to say, Prophecies, not entirely my cup of tea, because they at times can kind of somewhat feel like a cop-out. They're not... It's when the prophecy gets like maybe mentioned too much, I would say, and the author proposes so many different like theories, like as to what could this prophecy mean. Kind of like, again, what she said at the beginning of this video of leading the reader down with more like snippets of stuff or whatever, like more like putting the hero in danger constantly or something like that. That to me is sometimes how a prophecy can feel like, where they're just constantly mentioning this prophecy, and it feels as though they're constantly kind of making... I don't want to constantly question prophecy. I want the prophecy to be lingering in the back of my head throughout the series, and I want you to give me snippets of things of like, oh, maybe what this could be. Like Percy Jackson's prophecy. It isn't there. It isn't really... It's mentioned in book 1 because that becomes a very big thing, and so now you're like, oh shit, Percy could be fucking... Now it's a question of, will Percy make it to the age of 16 to be this prophesied, I guess, hero or whatever? And then book 2 happens. There really isn't mention of it. There really isn't much mention of it, except for right at the end when Thalia comes back. And it's like, wait, she's older right now than Percy. She'll make it to 16 first. So now the question is, will she be the one to die? And will Percy be the one to make it to 16? Or, you know, how is this going to work there? Was Percy never the hero? And then book 3 comes on, and Thalia becomes... I said I wouldn't do... I'm doing spoilers for Percy Jackson, because I'm assuming if you're an OSP fan, you've probably read Percy Jackson, you know the story. Sorry. And if you're in my age range, you've also read Percy Jackson entirely. But, so, Thalia in book 3, Titan's Curse, she becomes a hunter of Artemis, so she's no longer aging. Percy is, bam, he's back to being the hero, baby. So, what's happening there? Is he gonna die now? And then book 4, Battle of the Labyrinth, the question doesn't really rise up again. It's kind of lingering in the back. And then book 5 is our final battle. Percy is becoming 16. And then that's when Rick does the twist towards the end of, hey, Percy is the catalyst for this event. Percy is the reason, and because of the actions that he took, that because of his like good heart, that the prophecy is able to be fulfilled. He is the reason the prophecy can fulfill itself. He isn't necessarily who the prophecy is about. And that twist on the prophecy really worked. But kind of like, I go back and forth with my thoughts, like with like the kind of chosen one prophecy in Star Wars, where it's kind of basic, but like it works and it doesn't work at times in my head. It works in the sense of getting Anakin to question himself, right? As long as if the prophecy makes the hero question themselves, I like that. But largely, the prophecy doesn't seem to do that. Again, I can't really think of good examples of bad prophecies, because when a bad prophecy happens, either I stop reading, stop watching, or I completely forget about the story. So I can't think of any good examples. Oh my god, this episode's... I can't remember the last time I had a video go over an hour long. Oh. Fucking watch this video, please.
the process is negative. The fact is, bad things happening is a sad inevitability of being alive. We will experience sad and painful things, and while it's natural to want to run from that as much as possible, it's also natural to think about that, and to confront it. When we see a story about a doomed king learning he will someday be killed by a young lost heir to a usurped family, and we see him grappling with the sudden all-consuming awareness of his own mortality and his time running out, it echoes similar experiences that have hurt us, or will someday hurt us. Anyone who's ever acted or played a game of D&D knows the strange appeal of playing a character experiencing something terrible. The character is pretty much guaranteed to hate every minute, but with the protective sheath of fiction surrounding us, it can be oddly appealing for us as players and actors to immerse ourselves in crushing tragedy or agony or desperate madness experienced at arm's length.
Yup, I fucking... I don't know, I don't think my DM watches my videos. My YouTube videos. But I will message him ideas now and then of like, yo, this would be pretty traumatic for my character. Maybe we fit that in. And he's like, damn, that's fucked up. I'll think about it. You know, that dynamic. I love that dynamic. I love giving my character trauma.
While most doomed heroes experience sudden tragedy that only the audience knew was inevitable, prophecy doomed heroes see their inevitable end coming and react like a person who knows they're running out of time. And there's a special kind of tragedy in that, and while it's not fun to live through, it can be compelling to watch. It's similar but not identical to
The Story of How I Died. The opening scene is a flash forward to the moment of doom befalling the hero, and then the audience slowly catches up. Yep, that's me. Oh, fuck. I feel like I've read this, but I can't remember what story it was. Fuck. I know I've seen this done before, but I can't remember.
a different framing sequence we sometimes find doomed heroes in, The Story of How I Died. These stories almost unilaterally open with a narration from the hero explaining that they are doomed, or a flash forward showing us the moment of their downfall. We then watch the hero play out the story up to that point, learning in the process how exactly their doom happened. This subtype is unique in how often it completely cheats. Most other doomed hero stories commit to the sad ending, but stories specifically framed this way will often throw in a surprise twist about how the hero is actually fine, or was brought back immediately and thus didn't stay dead or whatever. This might be because implicit in the Story of How I Died framing is the question, how is the character narrating if they died? But you also get stories that open with a flash forward to how they died and then just reveal that they're actually fine, or they had a Chekhov's gun on hand to get them out of their specific desperate situation. It's fine and can be very fun, but like, if I'm sitting down for a good tragedy, I want to see a tragedy, and the best Story of How I Dieds make good on that promise. There are also a couple unique formats for doomed heroes that play out specifically in story, and they are the Apocalypse Log and the Time Loop. Apocalypse Logs are pretty simple.
Our heroes find some record of the tale of an in-universe doomed hero accounting their final tragic moment of death. Fucking Mistborn. Mistborn does this one. I really love that too. I love how Brandon Sanderson does it, because I'm reading The Way of Kings now, and he also has those little snippets of like from a history book or recording or whatever at the beginning of the chapters, and he did that in Mistborn as well, where he has snippets from like a book, a writing or whatever at the beginning of the chapters. I love that. I'm doing that for my fourth book, and it's really fun. It's fun.
They're a doomed hero story within a story that our protagonists encounter and unravel just like we, the audience, would in a typical doomed hero narrative. Apocalypse logs are usually diaries or audio logs where someone keeps a record of some event they're living through, like an experiment or an expedition, but even before the heroes get to the end of the journal, context clues usually inform them that things went wrong long before the apocalypse log reaches that point. Maybe the journal is found on a dead body or in an abandoned facility full of skeletons and facehuggers or something. The more terrifying or bleak the circumstances it's found in, the more worrying it is when the log opens with something like, "Everything's going totally great. We just threw a birthday party for Ensign Frank and the captain passed around free therapy dogs for everyone." Frequently, the heroes will have to get through the log post-haste because the thing that killed whoever wrote it is still around, and this knowledge might be the only way they can get an edge on surviving it. I have a lot of personal love for this specific trope, and it is entirely because the Mines of Moria scarred me at an early age. There's something extra impactful about seeing our protagonists processing the secondhand story of this poor doomed character's last moments, documented for posterity to give them a shot at survival. And they're also very spooky, but in a nice arm's length kind of way. Sure, the threat might still be around, but at least the heroes aren't fighting it blind, and the audience has the comfort of knowing some hint of what to expect. It's a lot more fun than sitting in a horror movie waiting for a jump scare to pop out. And then there's the time loop.
Our hero fails to prevent some doom over and over again as time resets, either willingly or outside their power. I'm not entirely a fan of time loop. I don't know. It's just like, I don't know. It's kind of like, cheap in a way. Like if the character fails, have them fucking fail and leave them failed. So like leave them with the consequence of failing instead of looping over it.
Variant, where, like in the Apocalypse log, the characters are experiencing all the greatest hits of the doomed hero plotline from a slightly meta perspective, but like the Prophecy variant, the hero is also experiencing it directly with the knowledge that they are doomed. In time loop plots, doomed heroes experience the same tragedies over and over again, typically trying to find ways to fix them, to stop the tragedy, to save themselves or a loved one, or even to escape the time loop in cases where they aren't willingly resetting the timeline to try and get it right. Like in the Prophecy case, they know they're doomed and they're fighting back, but the time loop adds one unique bit of flavor. We don't just...
However, the time loop in that movie was really well done. I loved this movie.
See the hero fail once. Where a standard tragedy only needs to contrive the hero's downfall one time, in a time loop the hero gets to try all sorts of different things to escape, and they typically fail over and over again, which can be very disheartening for them. Time loop stories need to be careful not to overdo it, though. Sometimes it can feel like the contrivances required to doom the hero over and over again are just absurdly unlikely, and if the universe seems to only follow the rule of this character is doomed and I don't care how it happens as long as they can't be saved, then the hero's time loop struggles can seem utterly pointless and disengaging because the fictional universe is being actively unfair. But on the flip side, if the time loop presents a suitably complex problem and it makes sense the hero would need that many tries to get it right, it can be very cool seeing the hero become more and more competent and powerful as they learn from their mistakes. It's kind of a balance, making the tragedy seem heartbreaking and inevitable and nearly impossible to stop without making it so contrived that the audience slips out of the immersion and gets mad at the author for cheating. Unusually, these doomed hero stories sometimes
extra mayo was the solution all along.
Have actual non-cheating happy endings when someone finds a way to thwart the tragedy and the time loop resolves. This works because we still get to see the tragedy play out to its conclusion over and over again, so it's not like the story doesn't commit to the bit. But since the entire point of the premise is to try and prevent the tragedy, that is one of the most logical ways to end the story. The tragedy that played out dozens or hundreds of times is finally prevented, the loop is broken, and everyone gets to move on. This is one of the only doomed hero narratives where the hero can escape their fate at the end, and it doesn't feel like a cop-out because we got to see the tragic narrative play out and it had a lasting impact. But this is definitely the exception and not the rule. For the most part, doomed hero stories are bummers. The heroes struggle against their fate, but they're eventually crushed by the inevitable. But in spite of that, there are a lot of ways these stories can be appealing to an audience. Not necessarily fun, but like good. In the same way a really hard workout or a nice long cry can hurt in a strangely soothing way, doomed hero stories can have aspects that can make them enjoyable to experience without at any point being nice or fun. We've already discussed the widespread use of dramatic irony in this genre, which is when the audience has information the characters don't. If we see a character blundering into a situation that we know is going to ruin them, we're helpless to stop them, but we also kinda can't look away. This is like 90% of the appeal of disaster documentaries that recount dramatizations of real historical tragedies the audience is expected to know about.
I still need to watch Chernobyl.
Going in. If we're dealing with a story about the Titanic or Pompeii or Chernobyl, we get the ache of dramatic irony from seeing regular people living their lives as though they aren't mere hours away from becoming very interesting footnotes in a future textbook. This taps into an unfortunate truth of being alive, which is that we can't predict when bad things are going to happen to us. Trying to predict all future bad stuff to protect yourself from it is an anxiety disorder. All the people in these stories, and in reality, are living their lives without a third-person omniscient perspective on their character arcs, and tend to operate on the assumption that their life will continue on at the same speed and in the same direction unless some force acts upon it. This is reasonable because the fact is, the forces that can whack a life in a completely new direction are unpredictable, and trying to predict or forestall every possible danger is a recipe for not taking any potentially rewarding risks and then getting walloped by unexpected consequences anyway. There's nothing wrong with being cautious about known dangers and exercising common sense, but none of us know how our lives are gonna go, and while there are some threats we can minimize, we just can't keep ourselves 100% safe, and there's gonna come a time when we deal with the impact of some terrible thing we couldn't have predicted or stopped. Being put in the role of an omniscient audience seeing someone else's life play out can give us a controlled taste of that nightmare scenario from a safely removed perspective. We aren't being haplessly buffeted by sudden cruel twists of fate, we're seeing it happen to someone else with the benefit of advance warning letting us know exactly what's coming for them. It's not a good feeling, but it's appealing in its own way. The same principle applies to catharsis.
Purification or purgation of emotions, such as pity and fear, primarily through art.
A term from ancient Greece that describes the purging of strong emotions through the medium of art and theater. An audience can experience positive emotions like triumph and joy through art, but also strong negative emotions like grief, fear, and rage by the proxy of the POV characters. The process of engaging with and finishing a story that causes those emotions can also allow an audience to release those emotions in a controlled manner, because once the story is over, so is the emotional trigger. Like sometimes you're feeling kinda lousy and you
I love living in glorious Pompeii, especially 2 weeks from retirement.
Decide to watch something you know is going to be heartbreaking because that'll let you get out the bad feelings through a controlled release. And if you were in a better mood, maybe you wouldn't want to watch that thing, even if you knew it was good, because it would put you in a much more volatile emotional state than general chillness. These are feelings that everyone experiences at various times, typically under circumstances that we can't control. If something is making us sad or afraid or angry, we might be able to control our relation to that trigger, removing ourselves from the situation or comforting ourselves with unrelated joys to mitigate the effects. But generally, the things that make us feel bad are not things we have direct power over, which can make them feel much worse. Any situation can become miserable if you can't leave, because the mere state of being stuck somewhere grates on us. But there is an appeal in exploring these emotions in a controlled and separate context. We obviously don't want to lose loved ones, but maybe we'll watch a movie where someone experiences that kind of bone-deep grief and immerse ourselves in the mindset with the benefit of knowing it's fictional. It's like the relief of waking up.
I am not ready for the Last of Us TV show. I'm to witness Sarah die for like the 10th time?
Up from a nightmare and knowing every terrible, heartbreaking thing you were just forced to process is suddenly irrelevant, but with the benefit that you get to choose when to wake up. Doomed hero stories promise that we will see our hero experience the kind of terrible fate we would never want to experience ourselves, and that can be an interesting flavor to sample. But these stories aren't actual.
Doomed hero stories can have surprisingly profound victories as long as the hero's doom still plays out. Yes, this was what I was saying earlier on, and she's probably going to say it much smarter than I did.
All doom and gloom. One huge benefit of this narrative structure is because the audience knows the heroes are doomed, the bar is set really, really low. In any other story, the hero dies at the end would be such a huge bummer that it majorly offsets any other victories they might have won along the way. But if we already know that and we're braced for it,
at least the artifact got out okay. Yeah, man, good job.
Those little victories we weren't expecting can be much more impactful. Maybe the doomed hero manages to limit the damage caused by whatever ends up killing them, or they saved.
Yep, she's saying it in a much smarter way than I did.
Their loved ones, or they fling a light into the future and give future generations a chance of understanding and maybe even fixing the nightmare that doomed them. These stories prepare their audience for the worst, but that means even tiny bright spots stand out very strongly against the dark. The benefit of an
God, I fucking love Rogue One too. That one, that's an amazing movie. I really love it. It's honestly in my top 3 of Star Wars movies. I fucking love this movie.
Look that's prepared for the worst is that every good thing that happens is always a pleasant surprise, and many doomed hero stories will go out of their way to reward the audience with little moments of optimism and hope and real, tangible good accomplished by the doomed heroes. It's still sad, but it's a sadness tempered with hope, and more meaningfully, with actual practical good deeds. This might be a bit of a hot take, but while hoping things will get better is all well and good, and hope is very important as a concept overall and cannot be abandoned, watching hopeful heroes hold on to that hope in the face of despair and then struggle, fail, and die pointlessly kind of loops back around to looking hopeless. Like, yeah, they had hope. Look at all the good it did him. This is a major frustration I have with grimdark narratives where the hero's struggles, while impressive, go completely unrewarded by the narrative. Instead, doomed hero stories will sometimes let their heroes struggle against their doom in a way that demonstrably, tangibly helps someone who actually can survive the story, rescuing loved ones or mitigating a disaster and saving lives that way.
Oh, you had to do the "Dad, did I do something wrong?" clip. Oh, I have watched that clip so many times and I have been hurt every time.
There are lots of ways to reward a doomed hero without saving them, and while it's not strictly necessary for a doomed hero to get a consolation not as doomed as he could have been, a lot of the most well-liked doomed hero narratives do give them a win, even if it's a very small one. Sometimes we go into a story knowing the hero is doomed, but sometimes we get to see a little further, and the story shows us that their doom is not the most important part of this character's life. Sometimes they get to matter beyond that, even if nobody but the audience ever knows what they did. There is an odd, heartbreaking, satisfying grief in bearing witness to the heroics of a protagonist who's been dead from the beginning, who cannot possibly save themselves and is no longer trying, who is instead using every second they have left in the narrative to make the story a better place for everyone who will outlive them. Because while we spend most of our lives caring for ourselves and driving our own narratives, at the end of the day, no matter what the night holds and what secret tragedies may be lurking for us, we can always choose to be kind, and that will always matter. So, yeah.
This was the best trope talk she's ever had. And I made this an hour long. Almost. If I end the video in 20 seconds. Oh man. I think I said all I needed to say throughout the video. Yeah, this was amazing. If you couldn't tell by the runtime, this is my favorite trope. It's obviously something that I think I know quite a bit about. So that was Trope Talk Doomed Heroes by Overly Sarcastic Productions. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.